Hello, welcome back to my fave fanfics. Here, I post, well, my favorite fanfictions, if that wasn't obvious. I do hope you'll enjoy them as much as I do. Please like and subscribe for more content. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome, my dear faves, to the first part of What If Ace Was Stuck in a Time Loop. Credit goes to jgginmeg for this fantastic fanfic. Link is in the description for those who prefer to read or want to contact the author. Warning. Graphic depictions of violence, implied/referenced suicide. Chapter 1. The Beginning. Ace's POV. Thank you for loving me. I jerk awake, gasping for breath, clutching at my chest, because Akainu punched a freaking hole in my chest, and Luffy was behind me. Oh, Cammy. Luffy. My stupid, dumb, idiot, of a brother jumped into Marineford to save me, falling from the sky, of all things, and then Akainu came along and punched a hole through my gut with a magma fist, and I died. I died. So how am I breathing? Why is there no pain in my chest that I, the son of the devil, deserve? And then a brown fluffy thing blocks my vision, and Thatch's pompadour. Hey, Teach. Good news, Portga's alive and breathing. And my blood runs cold. Because Teach, that traitor, pokes his head through the door, and grins, with his chessboard teeth and all, and laughs. Zahahahahahahaha. And I scream. My flames reach for the traitor, burning everything in their path, and the Mobi is on fire and people are screaming, but all I can focus on is Teach's face, a mask of horror and pain as he burns to death. And then the wood beneath creaks, the ship gives way, and the Mobi goes up in flames. And as the water's deathly grip closes in on me, I black out, and I can't remember anything else. Ace's POV. It's been so long, I can barely remember what happened the first time. In the original timeline, that is. I've lived for too long, thousands of years, but stuck in an infinite loop, where each time I die, I wake up again on Oyaji's ship, in the beginning when I'm captured by the Whitebeard pirates. And each time I die, it's after watching everyone I love die for me. Luffy. Marco. Oyaji. Thatch. Izo. Vista. Deuce. Haruta. And countless others. Watching countless people die for me, one after another, made me break. Not that I would ever admit it aloud. The first 53 times, I went insane, on a rampage, and ended up killing the Whitebeards. And it hurt to think about it, I had nightmares every time I sleep, but the 54th time, I finally understood what was happening, grasped the concept, and realized I had a chance to save my Nakama. But the universe hates a certain Portgas D. Ace, because every time, they all died. Did I mention the fact I never lived past the age of 26? So I stopped counting eventually, I stopped understanding the meaning of life, but I did know everyone who cared about me would all die, and I was too weak. Useless. Should have been drowned at birth. Drowning was painless, compared to everything else I experienced. Flashback. War raged against the Marines. Dodging an attack from an enemy, Ace laughed and punched him in the face, causing him to fly into an enemy giant. Whitebeard stood on top of the Mobi, watching as his children fought. Sengoku stood on the opposite side. Then, suddenly, sea-stone bullets rained from above, catching Ace in the arm, but he didn't care. A distressed trill came from above, which Whitebeard looked up to, and he saw a certain blue phoenix with blonde hair fall from the sky after getting fatally shot trying to protect a crew member. Marco. Ace yelled, and he ran to the first mate, kneeling beside him. The world faded into the background, the fights noiseless, and Ace barely caught Marco's last words. "Sorry, Ace. I'm dead, but you live on, you deserve to be born." And the Phoenix closed his eyes, and Ace wanted to scream, but he felt something else coming from his lips. Laughter. Ha 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 ha. He had a choice between burning the world down, crying, screaming until his throat bled, or laugh. Ace, the coward he was, chose the latter. Laughing like a maniac, Ace sobbed. Then another bang went off, and time seemed to slow down, as Oyaji was attacked from behind, and blood splattered out of his chest, each drop making a sickening plop, plop, on the ground. And Ace watched as one by one, his siblings, his nakama, were slaughtered, whether getting incinerated, blown up, mangled, stomped to a red smear, and Ace couldn't stop it. Too weak. Click. A gun cocked, and Ace felt the cold barrel pressed against his head. "Second Commander, with all due respect, I'm gonna kill you now." "Co-Commander." The words registered vaguely in Ace's head. Zahahahahahahaha. Teach. He'd murdered all of his siblings, his brothers, a traitor. Hell, he was no worse than Ace. Ace, the blood of a demon inside of him, cursed to endure the cycle, the loops, the resets, cursed to watch his family get slaughtered one by one before him. And something inside of Ace broke. And the gun went off, but Ace didn't hear the bang. And darkness swallowed him whole once more. Chapter 2. Act like an asshole. Present loop. Bloody. Fucking. Hell. Portgas D. Ace awoke to the sharp smell of antiseptic and lemon, his body laying on a white bed. Groaning, he stared at the wooden ceiling above, as he thought about his last loop. He'd made it to 23, had joined Whitebeard, and then he'd had a narcoleptic attack while standing on top of a staircase and proceeded to unceremoniously fall down, break his neck, and die. All in all, not the worst way to go, Ace thought as he pressed his palms onto his eyes. He shuddered as he recalled the glassy, unseeing eyes of his nakama, in that one particularly bad loop. The loop he saw every time he closed his eyes, that haunted his every waking moment, that served as a permanent reminder of how he was too weak to save everybody he cared about. Ace wanted to scream, but laughter was better, right? Unsettling giggles escaped from his mouth before he realized that if any passerby heard him, well, let's just say that they would be slightly unnerved by his laughter, the maniacal glint in his eyes, the creepy smile on his face. Plus, they wouldn't be convinced of his sanity. Sure, he was only a little mentally unstable, but he'd already went to a therapist multiple times in many, many loops. It didn't help. At all. Well, shit. Maybe he had a lot more problems than he'd originally thought. The first couple of times he'd been sent back in time, he'd foolishly thought that it was a chance to right all his wrongs, to save everyone he'd cared about. Well, now he didn't even know. He'd done so many things, making Oyaji the Pirate King, Luffy the Pirate King, hell, he'd once taken down the Gorosei of all things. Ace groaned again, pushing himself up on his forearms. He'd done so many loops that he couldn't even remember the Spade Pirates' faces. Couldn't remember his first mate, Masked Deuce, couldn't even remember what Sabo looked like. And he was fucking sick of it all. Killing Teach again and again, watching his family die again and again, watching too many wars unfold before him, knowing it was because a decision he made that caused a ripple in the timeline. Not to mention when he sometimes accidentally killed a crew member because he misjudged his own strength. Those loops were horrible, and he always killed himself afterwards, because he was unable to live with the guilt. Ace used to be a very prideful person. Afterwards he saw his family die again and again after making the same prideful choice. Knowing it was his fault, his prideful nature was kicked out from him. Ace wasn't the same person as he had been in the original timeline. At least Ace kept his strength, his fighting style, and different techniques. Obviously, he couldn't use some of his techniques or his strength since he had way less muscle than he had in some timelines, but that could be regained. Well, how should he play out this loop? Ace hummed quietly to himself, his fingers drumming on the bed he was currently laying on. He could be insane, he already was smart and calculative, shy and quiet, boring, someone who could easily be looked over without a second glance, or he could act like Luffy, he'd done that once. Hell, he could join the Marines, which was sure to make Garp happy, pretend to be an assassin, or maybe he should just be himself, not like he even knew what the hell that was like anymore. Ace smiled humorlessly. Suddenly, a brilliant idea popped into his mind. What if he acted like a complete and utter asshole, which, in retrospect, might get the Whitebeards to throw him off the ship and leave him behind without a second glance? He knew exactly which buttons to press, and when they finally grew tired of him and left him, they would be safe, and he would be safe, and everything would be fine, and maybe the universe would decide they were done with him and he could just pass away peacefully. Yeah, right. Shit never goes right with a D. Ace nodded to himself. He knew it would hurt to treat his nakama like this, but it would only hurt him. Not the Whitebeard pirates. They wouldn't even care. Well, fuck it. Let's go with this. The door to the medbay opened with a creak, and Thatch popped his head in. Hey, Teach. Good news, Pork is alive and breathing. Quote. And Teach laughs, but Ace is used to it all, but that doesn't stop his knuckles tightening. Unclenching his knuckles, he remembers the plan. Act like a complete asshole. I can do this. Where the fuck am I, and what the hell did you do to my crew? Ace yells at Thatch, stalking to the medbay door. Teach walks past the door to go do something. Thatch only laughs and says, "Not a morning person, are you?" Quote. But Ace expected this reply, and so he only growls and shoves the middle finger in Thatch's face. And he puts a dagger to his throat. Not that he would actually kill Thatch. Thatch, unconcerned of the dagger currently pressing against his jugular, says, "You slept for a couple of days, you must be really hungry. Come on, I'll go make you some food." Ace's stomach growls at the mention of food, and Ace remembers how good Thatch's food is, but Ace still spits, "How the hell will I know if you haven't poisoned your shitty food?" Thatch pouts, and grabbing Ace's hand, still blatantly ignoring the dagger at his throat, and drags him to a room in the Moby. "This is where you'll be staying until you join our crew. Also, you shouldn't play with knives," Thatch says, pouting again, and Ace glares at him, giving him his best shit face, but slowly removes the dagger from his throat. "I'll be back in a few minutes." Thatch chirps and walks to the kitchen to prepare food. Ace slams the door shut and thinks, "Well, to be a complete asshole, I should probably try to take Whitebeard's head right now." Funny, Ace knows the whole ship better than Oyaji and Marco, even though they were on the Moby Dick the longest. Slipping into the ventilation system, Ace crawls to where he knows is an unlocked weaponry. Ace sneaks inside, and his eyes land on a nice big axe. Perfect, Ace thinks. Marco groans, hand running down his face. He was going to have so much paperwork. Somehow, their resident fire brat snuck into the weaponry, found an axe, then proceeded to make his way up to the main deck, launch himself up at Oyaji, and attempt to take his head. And he'd made it to the weaponry without anyone noticing. Well, Thatch was bringing him some food now, so hopefully the fiery teen would calm down. Oh, how wrong he was. "Acey, I've brought you some food, Tilda," Thatch sings. "Get the fuck out," was the reply. Thatch, unfazed, sets the food down. It's not poisoned. Look. Thatch sticks a spoon in, and tastes it. "Oh wait, I'm dying," Thatch chokes and dramatically falls to the ground. "Get the fuck out," Ace coldly repeats, and sets the food on fire. It burns to ashes. Thatch, once again upright, has a hurt expression flash across his face, before quickly being replaced by a mask of indifference. Ace opens his mouth to apologize, an apologetic expression flashing across his face, but quickly slams his mouth shut. Shit. Did he catch that? Thatch sighs. "That was perfectly good food," he says, making puppy dog eyes. "You really should eat, it's not good for you, please." Quote. Ace, reforming a facade, heartlessly replies, "No. Can you please get the fuck out?" Ace asks, purposely stretching the please. Thatch sighs and walks out of the room. Ace slams the door behind him. Ace groaned and, his back to the door, slid down with his hands pressed on his face. Well, shit. This was going to be way harder than he'd thought. Thatch leaves the room, mind spinning. What just happened? Ace looked like he wanted to apologize, but changed his mind last minute. Not minute. Last second. He looked really sad for some reason, almost like he knew it would hurt me and wanted to apologize. Is he okay? One thing for sure, Thatch was going to pull a mother hen move on Ace and monitor him closely from now on. Chapter 3. This sucks. Ace flew through at least 6 different walls before stopping and leaving an ace-like dent in the 7th. Clutching the new injury he sported on his arm, he cursed, sitting up. After Thatch had brought him food that he'd burned to ashes, he hadn't been able to sleep, and consequently had spent the night tossing and turning in bed. What other way to cure his boredom than to attempt to assassinate Oyagi? Attempt to assassinate Whitebeard. He couldn't think of the Whitebeard pirates as his family anymore. Because every time they got close to him, it only ended up hurting them more, and it was his fault, and he was too weak, too useless. Stop, Ace reprimanded himself. If he went on with that line of thinking, he'd only end up heading down a spiral of self-loathing and depression, and once that happened he would break even more, both emotionally and physically. That wouldn't be good for him or his wonderful plan to get the Whitebeards to hate him. Then, of course, the Whitebeard pirates would notice once he got all sad and depressed, and they would try to make him better and pity him, and say they understood what he was going through, but they didn't. Not at all. De nada. Ace was fairly certain they weren't stuck in a time loop, like he was. Ace stood up, swaying slightly on his feet, not even grimacing at the pain. He was used to it. After all, he'd been tortured by Teach in one timeline, where he'd somehow found out about Ace's parentage and kidnapped him. Then of course there was that timeline, that Ace had nightmares about every night. Not to mention the one where he'd been kidnapped by Kaido and been clubbed many times with Kaido's spiked club thing. Ace didn't even know the word for it. His latest attempt at Oya Whitebeard's head hadn't gone well. He'd planned a sneak attack, and in the dead of night had swung a Kairoseki dagger at his throat. He'd been swatted through multiple walls like a fly. Oh well. He expected nothing less from Shirohige. It's not like he actually wanted to kill him. He just wanted to be thrown off the ship. Shouts were heard in the distance. Ace sighed. With his luck, he'd probably woken the whole crew, at the very least half the ship with all the commotion. Stepping out of the wreckage of what used to be walls, he casually went back to his room, glaring at any bleary-eyed pirate who happened crossed his path. He saw Marco and Thatch run past, and he quickly ducked behind a shadowy corner hoping they didn't notice him. Once he was in the clear, he continued to his room, opening the door, and closing it afterward. He laid down in the bed, ignoring the throb on his forearm, closing his eyes even though he didn't want to sleep. Not like he could anyway, in his current mental state. He usually stayed awake as many nights as possible until he collapsed out of exhaustion. He could almost hear Makino's angry tut-tut if she learned about his sleeping habits. Ace could only remember that Makino had olive green hair and wore a bandana. Sure, in some timelines he'd visited Luffy, but meeting him too early always resulted in something bad. In most cases, Garp went after him, saw his personality change. What change? He didn't have any change, aside from the fact he wasn't exactly mentally stable, and proceeded to go crazy and start an all-out war with the Whitebeard pirates. It had happened more than once, and in all of those timelines, Luffy, Garp, Oya Whitebeard, Marco, Thatch, everyone died one by one. Like weeds being uprooted then burned. Of course there was that one timeline where he'd visited Luffy, and in that timeline things had gone horribly wrong. Ace shuddered and turned over, but something at the dark corners of his mind tugged at him, then Ace gave in to the feeling and knew nothing more. Feel the pain that the past left, I will keep fighting until my last breath. No witch forgets me, shadow of envy, ripped through my chest until my heart bled. Start again, learning the steps of the dance of death. Start again, timelines diverging to the darkest depths. It was raining, but Ace didn't care. He walked the trail to where Dayton and her mountain bandits lived. He had to see Luffy's smiling, cheerful face, or he'd go insane. He had to. And he knocked on the door, and Luffy opened it, and his smile was so blinding that Ace couldn't help but light up with joy. Luffy. Ace. I missed you so much. Luffy yelled, crying as he flew into Ace's opened arms. And Ace accepted him with open arms, and scanned his smiling, tear-stained face, committing his smile to memory, because if he forgot it he would lose it. I missed you too, Ace said, but Luffy would never know the gravity of those words. Ace had missed Luffy for hundreds of loops. So distracted were the two that they didn't notice the cloaked figure watching them, hidden amongst the treetops. Brat, growled Dayton from the doorway. And Ace had forgotten what she'd looked like, but his face lit up with a warm smile. I missed all of you, he said. Thank you for taking care of me and this idiot, over here. He gestured to Luffy. He had just got here, and planned to go hunting with Luffy. But he hadn't known how soon he'd have to say goodbye. Moments later, the sun shone through the clouds, and Ace had asked Luffy if he'd wanted to go hunting. Naively. Luffy said yes, so the two grabbed their pipes and as they walked through the forest Luffy chattered endlessly. Nay, Ace, did you know that there's a Croc Lord now? Nay, Ace, did you know that Makino came over? She brought me some really cool shirts. I wish you were there to see it, though. Nay, Ace, Garp might come over today, he mentioned that at our last visit. Nay, Ace, are you okay? The innocent question jerked Ace out from the darkest depths of his mind. Yes, Luffy, I'm okay. He forced a smile on his face. But he'd forgotten how Luffy had inhumane skills at reading people. Frowning, Luffy stuck his tongue out. No, Ace. You're really sad and stuff. I can feel it. Tell me, please. I can make it better, because I'm strong, and I can just fight whatever's bothering you off. Ace smiled softly. I'm not sure if you could fight this off, Luffy. Indeed, the weight and memories of all the timelines, loops, he'd gone through, he had suffered trauma and depression amongst other issues. Luffy gasped, offended. Excuse me. I'm so strong now. I bet I could beat you in a spar right now. Quote. But Ace froze at the word, now, because it wasn't Luffy saying that, but instead Sengoku. And the Marines were rushing his family, and they were all dying one by one. But then Luffy yelled, Ace, behind you. Quote. Ace, distracted by his thoughts, almost didn't dodge the kairoseki knife aiming for his face. He was cut on the upper arm. Right over the C in his ASCE tattoo. And only one thought was in his mind, one word over and over again, a steady drumbeat. Luffy. 3 masked men surrounded Ace. But he made quick work of them. He was scanning everywhere for Luffy before their bodies hit the ground. Then he heard Luffy scream, and Ace ran after the men who dared to kidnap his brother. And as he followed the sound and saw the signs of a scuffle, he turned a corner in the forest. There he was, Luffy in all his struggling glory, fighting against 5 men who held him down and clamped a kairoseki handcuff on his wrist. Luffy collapsed from exhaustion and he was loaded on. Ace's blood ran cold. A slave ship. He would recognize the symbol from anywhere. And all the villagers were being loaded up, one by one. Except for him. He had done this. He had brought the slavers on his brother. And now everyone would suffer the consequences because of his mistake. What had he done wrong in the timeline? What had he done to cause this? Luffy's dream was to be the king of the pirates, the freest man in the world. And now Luffy would never have that because of Ace, a stain on the world, someone who shouldn't exist. And lost in his thoughts, Ace didn't notice the ship sailing away from the harbor before it was too late. He ran to Striker, his boat, and tried to close the gap. And he lurched awake with a gasp, cold sweat running down his back. Tilda. We descend, take my life, I'll bleed instead, I'll clean this mess. Make sure they're free of death, I mean the best. Times I'm stuck on the fence. Problems won't work out the way I intend. Tilda. Ace rolled over, unintentionally out of the bed. He landed on the wooden floor with a thump. He sat up and shook his head hard, clearing out the remnants of the dream. Cursing, he sat up as his stomach growled, demanding food. Yes, yes, I'll feed you, Ace said to his stomach before realizing how insane he would sound talking to nothing. He stalked out of his room and looked in a random person's room for a fishing rod. He was supposed to act like an asshole, right? That included a violation of privacy. Besides, he'd used his observation hockey beforehand, and there was no one in the room. After stealing a fishing rod, he proceeded to make his way up to the main deck. After years of time traveling, he knew the Moby so well he could travel the whole length in his sleep. Ace picked a secluded area he'd often used in the past where watchers up on the crow's nest couldn't see him, and it was right next to the sea. Perfect for fishing. He cast his bait, a random beetle he'd found, and waited patiently. Marco sat in the dining hall with Thatch. That brat, Yoy, he said, cursing under his breath. Thatch hummed thoughtfully. Don't get your feathers in a twist, turkey. He was slapped upside the head. I swear, if he's going after Oyaji every day, I will have so much paperwork. I have to take over the 2nd Division too, since they don't have a commander. Marco could already see, in his mind's eye, the hellish amount of paperwork piling up. 16th Commander Izo plopped himself down on Marco's left side. He went after Oyaji in the middle of the night. Honestly, couldn't he have waited until the morning? Quote. A crash was heard, along with someone cursing heavily. One Portuguese Ace skidded to a stop, next to Thatch, flames licking at his shoulders, fishing pole in his hand. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear Yoi, Marco muttered under his breath. How exactly did he get there? Well, let's go back to find out. Ace sighed. No luck at fishing, they were probably in an area without any fish. He was so hungry, though. Oh well. Time to go try to kill Oya Whitebeard. With what, though? He looked thoughtfully at the fishing pole in his hands. Shrugging, he stepped out of his spot and made his way around the entirety of the deck, before he was right next to Oyaji's giant chair. He'd hidden his presence well. Jumping from the left, he swung his fishing pole at Whitebeard, who was drinking sake. Ace cursed mentally. He remembered that one timeline where Oyaji died because he drank too much. The light died from his eyes. He couldn't kill Oyaji. No, Whitebeard. Redirecting the fishing pole's trajectory, he aimed it at the sake bottle instead. It exploded into pieces. Ace may or may not have lighted it on fire. Whitebeard frowned, annoyed. Was this karma? He shouldn't have been drinking sake before the afternoon. But that was a perfectly fine jug of sake. He swung his arm, and Ace was consequently flung through walls until he reached the dining hall. The commanders blinked at the sudden appearance of Ace. Izo had his jaw hanging open, as Ace jumped to his feet, plopping his orange cowboy hat on his head. Ace looked around. He had to consciously stop himself from bowing and saying, "Sorry for disturbing your meal." Where had that come from? The injury on his arm throbbed again, like lightning coursing through his veins. He looked and saw Marco, Thatch and Izo. He couldn't deal with all three of them right now. Too much emotional stress. He growled irritably, glaring at the three commanders. "No sorry for disturbing our meal?" Thatch asked jokingly. Izo regained his composure, while Marco sat quietly, a mask of simple indifference. Marco narrowed his eyes as something brief passed over the teen's face, too fast for him to read. The brat was an enigma. Yoi. Ace frowned. "I'm so terribly sorry for disturbing your meal. I really do hope you choke on your food and die," he said, voice dripping with venom and sarcasm. Was that good enough? Will that convince them that I'm an ungrateful brat, undeserving of a family? Izo frowned. Ace was very rude. But the state of his clothes was even worse. The commanders watched him as he smoldered, then walked out, the same thought on their minds. What the fuck just happened? Ace groaned as he made his way back to the safety of his room. He'd played his part badly. He froze for a second, seeing Marco and Izo. He saw their bloody corpses instead. He forced a painful smile on his face. It looked like a stoical grin, an embarrassed expression, a grimace. Make the ends softer. More teeth. Stop the maniacal glint in his eyes. That was better. Not really. He was fine. No, he wasn't. He laughed, a long, broken note, sad, insane, angry, happy. He didn't know what he felt. He definitely was enthusiastic. Marco frowned as Izo left the table, presumably to follow Ace. Did you see that too? Thatch asked. Yeah. As in an infinite spiral of sadness, depression, loneliness, and self-hate. Yoi. Marco asked, finally identifying the expression. Thatch looked at him, surprised. I only figured out sadness and self-hate. The depression and loneliness were a guess yoy. Oh. I'm going to follow Ace, Thatch said, out of the blue. You mean stock? Asked Marco. Yup. Oh, I'll help too.
Unfortunately, this part is over. I hope you enjoyed it. My apologies for all those quotes. Please have a good morning, afternoon, evening, or night. See you next time, my dear faves.